Welcome to the latest episode of the Motorvait Supplier Showcase. I'm Neil Smith, CEO of Motorvait Automotive Consultancy. And in this series, I'm sitting down with the innovators behind the UK's most exciting automotive businesses, whether they're game-changing startups, industry disruptors, or established legends. We'll be diving into the latest digital and physical products currently shaping up the UK vehicle retail space. If it's making waves, we'll be covering it. My guest today is Harry Bott, the Director of Automotive of Mediahawk, Core Analytics for Better Marketing. Welcome, Harry, and thanks for being my guest on this, the latest episode of the Supplier Showcase podcast.
Thank you, Neil. I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. I love a good podcast.
Good. Well, I'm sure we'll get into some areas today, and we'll have a good old chat around the automotive piece. So, look, we've known each other for a number of years now, primarily as a result of the online coffee mornings organised by Brett Ward back in the early days of the COVID lockdown. But to enable our viewers to get to know you a little better, a regular feature of this podcast series is the guest icebreaker. So please tell us 3 interesting facts about yourself, 2 of which are true and 1 that isn't. We'll then let the viewers ponder this during the podcast, and I'll ask you to reveal which are true and which is false at the end.
Okay, so I had a long thought about this one. I'm going to start with my degree at university was I read history of art. And secondly, outside of Mediahawk, I am a farmer. And thirdly, because I always get teased for being very posh, I will admit that I have once played cricket with a member of the royal family.
Excellent. Okay, so history of art, I did that at A level, yeah. Harry. Didn't take it on the degree level. So we got something in common there. So look, thanks for that. We'll allow our viewers to dwell on those facts during the podcast. And as I said, I'll ask you to reveal which was fake at the end. So, okay, let's learn a little bit more about Harry Bott. Tell me about you, your background, and how you ended up where you are today.
I've got one of the more bizarre backgrounds than many people you'll meet because I've done more different jobs than you would believe. So my first job after I left university was I worked in the city as a lease broker. So actually I understand car finance really well because we're involved in car finance. Yeah. And I helped bring down British and Commonwealth with something called Atlantic Computers, but not many people know that. Then my second job was I ended up working in the minerals industry, working for a company called BHP, selling coal and iron ore to the worldwide steel industry. And I am the man who has sold 1 million tons a year to Redcar. So you can say I've sold coal to Newcastle out of Australia. And I lived in Australia for a couple of years. And when I came back from Australia, I did an MBA. And that was the first dot-com boom. So I got into online recruitment and thought I was going to make my fortune. Well, I very rapidly got sacked from that company because I couldn't get any turnover. And I then joined a B2B trade magazine house and set up something called the Publican.com, which was the largest trade website for publicans in the country. And we had, in 2001, we had 35,000 publicans chatting to each other before anyone had heard of social media online. It was remarkable. And I left that because I came across the fact that telephone numbers threw off data. And if you put a different telephone number in different trade magazines or in Auto Trader, you could find out where the response came from. So it was a very basic package. And my business partner, who I set Mediahawk up with, he was number 2 in IT at a company called EMAP. For those who don't know EMAP, it was a FTSE 100 media company. And he was the number 2 in IT, and he was really being beasted at the time. And he said, I told him about these telephone numbers throwing off data. And he said, oh, I could write the program because he's an ex-MOD programmer. So he, in his bedroom for 3 months, sat down and wrote the first program for Mediahawk, and off we went. Brilliant. And that was the start of Mediahawk. And 24 years later, here we are.
24 years. That's impressive, yeah. So look, as one of those original founders of Mediahawk, since the inception 24 years ago, just tell us a little bit about how that business has developed over that 24 years.
Well, it's developed. What I've really loved about it is we started with the very basic, the different telephone numbers. And as the people have understood that market tracking and analytics has become more and more important as we've gone into a digital sphere. So we've expanded. One of the things I'm really proud about with Mediahawk is we have no venture capital backing. We have no backers. We've grown the whole business out of cash flow. We've never taken on any debt. So we've been a very stable business, which has allowed us to really focus on our core value of focusing on what making our customers more successful. Because I have a philosophy that if I can help my customers make more money, then they're going to want to use my services. So if we can focus on the customers and their needs, and if you think what is the problem that automotive retailers face, and actually manufacturers, is they spend a fortune on marketing, especially things like Auto Trader, and they really got to know what is their return on investment. Yeah. So as the business has progressed, we've got better and better at providing the tools and the services to make people really understand what is or isn't generating response, and actually how do I get more response with a greater demand on my marketing budget.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think from my background, when we were selling 2,000 cars a month, it was a key part of the strategy to understand where those phone calls were coming from, to analyse the return on investment across the digital channels, the telephone, walk-ins, and make sure we knew where to put our money. But even today, I'm talking to dealers, 100-car dealers, 200-car dealers, and some of those still haven't got call tracking enabled. And it's amazing to me. It is mind-blowing because it still represents probably 40 to 50 to 60% of their contact. And
absolutely, and then we can talk about the phone. I mean, the phone, the way I describe it, the phone has become the Cinderella part of marketing because it's bloody messy.
Yeah,
it's because it's not related. So what's interesting is in the trade, what I've seen, especially in the last 5 years, everyone's gone on about digital leads and we need to have digital experts. That's because a digital lead is actually easy to track.
Yeah,
someone fills in a form online. Bang, it goes into some lead management system, whatever you want to call it, whatever name you want to call it. And then it can be managed by a manager. And then it's up to them how quickly they want to get back, how they respond, etc. Well, the phone call, some human being, or we can now do it slightly differently, but some human being physically has to put that into the lead management system before it gets managed.
Yeah.
So there's massive leakage, what I call leaky bucket, leaky bucket. And it is, you're absolutely right. We have seen phone calls as a lead methodology come down over since I started. It was 60, 70%. It's now down on the 40, 50%. So if you're using someone like Auto Trader as an example, people can measure their form fills from Auto Trader. But if they're not measuring their phone calls and seeing if they're getting on, we know from people, from speech analytics, but people who listen to our calls as well, we know that 20% of Auto Trader calls never even get to a salesperson.
Yeah.
And of those full Auto Traders, 50% never even make it onto a lead management system.
Yeah, and that's quite frightening, isn't it? Because that is a cost to that business.
That's a cost. And if you can just turn those bar dials down to 10% and 20%, that is more opportunity to do business. That's more opportunity to make money. That's more opportunity to get back quickly to your customer.
Well, look, and that you're talking my language there, Harry, because I constantly bang on about lost opportunity cost. That's exactly what we're talking about. And I think I remember going to a dealer 3 or 4 years ago, good dealer, well established, and was chatting to them about their leads and how they managed them and what the conversion rates were. And I said, what about your phone calls? How are you tracking them? Oh, well, they come in, the salesman takes it, they put it onto the CRM. I said, well, how do you know that more on the CRM?
They don't.
I said, what do you mean? Some of my salesmen wouldn't. I said, well, think about it.
Exactly.
With the best will in the world, they're going to be busy. Someone walks in the showroom. Do they remember to put that previous telephone call on there? No. With the worst case scenario, if they don't think they're going to convert that customer, do they want that on their figures on the system as a non-converted lead? It's to me, it's still amazing that there's that lack of sort of tracking of that. Well, as you said there, 50% of what's coming into a dealership is still today telephone calls.
Shall I give you a scary statistic? We know, because one of the things we do with Mediahawk with a lot of our customers at the end of every month, they take all that sales data and they wash it through our data, and we can then track precisely where the return on sales came from the different sources. And we know that 75% of Auto Trader calls will convert to a sale within 2 days, maximum 2 days of the initial phone call. Now, I have a theory. People, I'm teased for this, but it's one of my theories. I'm going to be old-fashioned here. And when you were young, you probably didn't do this, but we had a theory called Snog Window. Have you heard of the Snog Window theory?
No.
Okay, so I think when I explain this to salesmen, they laugh, but they get it. When you're younger, I'm now happily married, and I've been happily married for 30 years, but when I was young, there was a period where some women may have found me quite attractive, and I would definitely find them attractive. And when you meet someone, there's a window that opens up, and there is an opportunities that you might do business together. And that was when I was young. That was what was always known as the Snog Window. But what's bizarre about it is there's always a cut-off point when nothing's ever going to happen, and you become friends. Okay, and I always tease people. What's really interesting about the car trade is 10 years ago the Snog Window was 10, 15 days. Now the modern consumer has done all their research. They probably looked at 160 touch points. When they pick up the phone, if you don't snog them within one day, their problems are they've gone somewhere else. And when you explain that to people, they all laugh and they go, yeah, the phone it's right at the end point of them ready to trade. And if you don't snog them then, you're never going to get them. Yeah. Sorry, that's me being a little bit crude about explaining why the phone's so important.
No, but look, 100%, and I think that's where we we see still today that lost opportunity. I'd say we were really focused in the last few years of Imperial. We had the contact centre, SLA of 15 minutes to get back to customers. We knew the power of that main dominant aggregator lead. It was 2.5 times better than any other lead we were getting into the business at the time. We knew that, and we had to respond. So. And then we would do that tracking, and the analytics probably weren't as good 7-8 years ago as they are now. So trying to tie up that sale with the initial lead was never that easy, depending on the CRM, and that's why we built our own CRM. But I suppose something you touched on a minute ago, I think, around the sort of analysing of that phone call, that customer conversation now, is that something that's now being automated?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's really exciting from where we're going is two areas that are really exciting. Firstly, we have something called dynamic numbers, whereby providing unique telephone numbers for every unique visitor on a dealer's website, we can actually behave like a cookie, so we can see where people come from, at what point they pick up the phone in the customer journey. So that can link all the way back to their different advertising sources. So we can, again, using Autotrader or Google PMAX adverts or whatever, we can see where the click, if a click came from that, if it went on to either be a form fill or a phone call.
Yeah.
So you now can link that to your journey. The other thing that's really exciting is speech AI. So what we now do is we can take a half-hour phone call. Not only can we know where it comes from, because we've got the caller's identity, etc. Secondly, we transcribe every element of the phone call, so you can actually read the transcript. Thirdly, you can put keywords. So let's say you're a sales manager or a dealer principal, and you wanted to know how many people have put finance. You can press the button on finance and see the end of the phone call where they mentioned finance. But fourthly, the really, really clever bit, and it is transformational, is you can ask it any question you want. And not only will it come up with an answer, so was that a car sale? Or did it go to voicemail? Or did that even get through to a salesperson? You ask that question, the AI will go away and come up with a conclusion, so you can put models around it to make it come up with the answer. And then it'll give you a 3-word sentence that says why it came to that conclusion.
Brilliant.
And then you can start training it.
Well, I think for me, I've seen some of this in action, and certainly from that conversational AI piece and the ability for it to understand and nuance those conversations. But I think if we look at everything that's going on in the finance space at the moment, I'm sure that adds a lot of weight and value to the sort of the whole finance auditing piece. And because the last bastion of sales execs dealing with customers on the phone, would they be following the right transcripts or the right scripts for finance sales? Now, and with everything that's in that space at the moment of protecting dealers and protecting customers, I'm sure this is something that's being worked on and developed now.
Yeah, no, I mean, and so that to me is really exciting. So suddenly with speech, as I said right at the earlier, it's messy. It's connected. It's not, but actually now we can get the data that you can start helping you put it into. We're not quite there yet, but you'll be able to put it into databases or lead management systems. And also speech, we can do some really clever things. So I don't know how many of your audience, how much of the audience are using PMAX and vehicle display ads.
Yep.
So what we can do now with speech, it can listen to the call and say, was this a sales call? Yes. Send that back to Google and say, right, create an audience around that person.
Brilliant.
Whereas at the moment, everyone's doing vehicle display ads based on form fills and digital leads. With speech, we can now create pretty much instantly a PMAX lead and an audience based around a phone call.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. So again, those 50% of people that are ringing in are now being counted in that audience.
Yeah, and what gets really clever, even more clever, is that if someone's rung in, say, from a, I don't know, an Auto Trader number, but actually they've written it down and it's actually a service number, we can then start putting negative keywords against them. So we're not wasting our spend from
Yeah.
Google, because we can say, well, actually, when we see that person, don't serve to them.
Yeah, and I think that's valuable. Well, it's definitely valuable. I mean, I've seen PMAX campaigns run, and they will generate, because it's Google controlling that campaign. They will generate calls from someone who's looking to buy a part for a Toyota rather than buy a Toyota
Exactly.
car. So you've got to start looking at that and saying, and I remember working with a car supermarket last year, and once we switched some PMAX on, we were probably getting 20% of the calls that were coming through were not related to the sale of a vehicle. So we had, and it was different, even different franchise groups. People were ringing in based on that PMAX campaign. Or is that Southern Toyota? Well, no. So it was about making that campaign work as efficiently as possible, because once you let Google control that PMAX, there is always going to be some element of, some of those leads are not going to be proper opportunities, are they?
No, no. It's in Google's interest to spend your money.
Of course it
is. So it goes back. One of the things I love working with customers and talking to people about is, it's not in the marketing front, there's no problem of marketeer generating leads. The problem they face is twofold. One is that when it goes over the side, is how the salespeople then perform with those leads. So are they blowing them up? So how do we link those to show the performance on that side? And the other one is, we know basically where the key spend is now going. How do I make sure I'm maximizing my opportunity with what I'm spending my money on? And I think there's two real nuggets within the dealer groups: is how do I make sure the sales and marketing are aligned? Because historically they just sold, report on how many leads you've done. Not, well, actually should be report on how many leads and what was the conversion rate and and how do we tighten the conversion rate? That's on the one side. The other one is, how can we are we really happy we're optimizing what we're doing? And that's the discussion I have with a lot of my customers, or anyone. Someone says, oh, Auto Trader is really expensive. And I always say, no, it's not expensive unless you can confirm to me that every single leak point you're on top of and you understand how you are or aren't performing. Yeah. And then tell me it's expensive.
Yeah, no, look, again, hark back to the Imperial days, we knew that an Auto Trader lead would convert 2.5 times better than a Google AdWords lead.
Yeah, exactly.
My Google AdWords lead was half the price of an Auto Trader lead.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had to make a decision because I needed volume. So I would put a certain amount of spend against AdWords, knowing we had to work those leads a bit harder, but knowing the cost was less. But clearly the Auto Trader lead was, as you've said today, within 2 days, you should be converting that lead. If you leave it 5 or 6 hours to contact that customer, they've spoken to a lot more other frogs that one of them's going to kiss them and turn into a prince. Right? So going back to the Snog Window theory, you've got to be the first person to get to that. We said to our guys, we need to be first, to the point that my contact center would come in at 8 o'clock in the morning of their own volition to ring customers that had inquired overnight before they got to work to try and get in there. And a lot of customers would be driving into work, but they'd be quite happy that we contacted them to try and get them further down the road in purchasing the vehicle. So, okay, so look, I suppose just talk to me a little bit about maybe exciting projects or potential partnerships or other innovations that we can look forward to now and in the future from Mediahawk.
So obviously we're doing a lot of clever stuff with speech and about the speech AI, so that's going to improve. An integration we've just done, but I'll give you a sense of where we're going. We've done a very clever integration with DealerWeb.
Okay.
And so what DealerWeb, we can do 2 things now with DealerWeb. Any of our customers or anyone who's got DealerWeb, we can now do this, where we show 2 things. With DealerWeb, they put in where the sources were. We actually match their sources against what we see the sources, and we'll give them the true sources, as opposed to someone's just dropped down a button and said, oh, it's just this or that. So they're much more accurate on where their sources are coming from. But the other one, which is really exciting, is we take all of the sales calls that we've identified as sales calls, we wash that against DealerWeb on a daily basis. We can then give a report, which is called the exceptions report. If we can't match it, we say, here's 5 calls we can't see on DealerWeb. Click here to listen to them, or click here to read the recording. So really that gives you an idea. We're doing much more integrations into lead management systems, so where we can automate as much as possible. Our vision is to just be able to try and dump data in to get the sales manager see what's going on.
Well, that's great. I mean, and that's gold dust, because I was working with a dealer last year who had DealerWeb, and manually I took about 4 or 5 hours to go through all the leads that had been sent into the business from Auto Trader and various other channels, manually comparing that which was on DealerWeb. So that was digital leads and phone calls. And that took a long, long time, but we probably saw that around about 20% of calls that had come into the business had not gone into DealerWeb. So that,
absolutely.
yeah.
We've automated that. We've done that. That's done. And so you could see other lead management systems coming to a call tracking business near you. Well, obviously you can imagine. But now we've done the hardware. I mean, it was complicated. Our guys, we have a lovely team of developers in the UK, but it was complicated. But they've done it. They've worked that out.
No, that's great, and look, that is really valuable. Just presenting that as an exception report, because I think the biggest issue I see with dealers at the moment, clearly, especially those maybe owner drivers or the smaller dealerships, they're very time poor at the moment.
Yeah,
you know, they're trying to source stock, they're trying to deal with the latest finance issues. They've got lots of challenges that they're working through, and the last thing they do really is log into these systems, and use the analytics and really work with them. So anything you can provide that is like an exception report that's daily sent out to those dealers.
It gets emailed to anyone you want in the business, and here's 5 calls. We can't see them. If they came from Auto Trade or they came from your used car locator, we can't see them. You know, you can deal with it. One quick thing that I would say I love saying this with dealers. One of the 90% of car dealers, because the phone is still so important, 90% of car dealers don't telephone interview their staff.
Right.
So one of the things, and the reason why it's really important to telephone interview staff, and I always enjoy this, is when you ask a dealer, do you telephone interview staff? They all go no. And if 50% of all of your sales inquiries are coming from the phone, one of the problems one faces is that here we are on air. Digital voice reduces the cadence on. If I meet you face to face, I've got 100% voice. It reduces the cadence to 70%. So basically, it means if you meet someone in real life and they're boring, in real life, they're fucking boring on the phone.
Brilliant.
And the point is, I love it because car dealers, they never telephone interview. And I say to them, and it's like a bingo moment. And this is one thing, a takeaway from today. It's like a bingo moment. They go, 2 things. If you telephone interview someone, you don't have to have them in your office. And if they sound awful on the phone, thank God, because you can be HR, you can be done if you don't give someone half an hour of your time, because they'll say you haven't treated them properly in this modern world.
Well, so, that's a great point.
Straight telephone interview is going to save them time, and secondly, they're going to find out when they're fucking boring on the phone. And therefore, that is the first voice a human hears. And I'm trying to sell, as I say to car dealers, as I say to my customers, why do you earn margin? You earn margin because you're putting a human interface around a lump of metal. That is where your margin comes from. It comes from the excitement. It comes from all the wonderful things that you're doing for the customer experience. And if the first thing is someone really awful on the phone, they're not going to want to do business with you. Anyway, that's the side, but that's one of my passions is telephoning your staff.
Yeah, it's a good point. A good point. Okay, so look, Harry, we're nearing the end of the podcast. It's gone by in a flash. So look, in conclusion, Mediahawk is a call tracking and marketing analytics solution designed to be easy to use, accurate and reliable, so you can quickly and confidently find out what's working and what isn't within your marketing channels. So, Harry, I've really enjoyed our chat today, and thank you for taking the time to take us through the services that Mediahawk offers. Before I go, we need to clear up the icebreaker question for our viewers. So, which of the 3 interesting facts was in fact false?
So I will admit that I read history of art at university, which people always find a bit odd, that I'm running a business, running a fund and having a lot of time. And I have not played cricket with a member of the royal family.
Right.
So I am, outside of Mediahawk at weekends, I'm a farmer.
You are?
I mean, it's like Clarkson's farm, I have to say.
Brilliant.
It's 100% like Clarkson Farm, a lot of dead animals and chaos and no money. And Rachel from accounts doing her best to try and remove it from my midst. So
we're not gonna see a regular series on Netflix called Box Farm, are we?
no, I'm sadly not. But sadly not. I love Mediahawk too much. What I'm doing on Mediahawk, but at weekends I'm a farmer.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, thanks again, Harry, for your time today. For more information about Mediahawk, visit the website www.mediahawk.co.uk or message Harry on LinkedIn. Thank you for watching, and a quick reminder that here at Motorvait, we offer 1 hour remote one-to-one dealer discovery sessions for free. To learn more about these sessions and why you should book one, visit our website, www.motorvait.co.uk. Goodbye for now.
Thanks, Neil. Brilliant.
Thank you. Cheers.